I'm Kevin Legendre, speaking to you from the Delaware Pavilion in Bexhill-on-Sea. And in this series, I'll be introducing an exciting range of new music by outstanding jazz talent from the south of England. From a region-wide call-out, 10 composers have been selected to create a new piece of original music for Jazz South as part of its Radar Commissions program. Each composer has been invited to write for any combination of up to 3 performers with no limits on instrumentation or creative concept. The result is a wonderful and eclectic mix of musical styles and compositional ideas, showcasing the talent of each composer and performer, as well as a range of concert venues, studios, and other more surprising recording locations in the south of England.
Good Trouble. A pairing made famous by a man who also had a dream. A young preacher who started with an audience of livestock pets. A lifelong battle for fairness that's as inspirational as it gets. Friends murdered for the right to be friends. Non-violence leading to violence against his person instead of the peace it intends. There is no profit for a great conquering nation without a soul. He sold that spreadsheet way beyond the borders of normal homegrown goals. A vast lesson in how to soften the human heart. In spite of many vicious attempts, his spark did not depart. Holding on to a mind and spirit considered subhuman, worth less than a gland, while each step over that bridge moved peace closer to where we all should stand. Racist hatred only thinly masking the fact that we all lose. Yet singing a way out of prison showed there remained paths to choose. Tackling this problem at a higher level means he saw glimpses of the stunning stratospheric truth. Ah, what scenes! Not in an expensive craft flying away from an earth in turmoil, but many hard-won reminders at the end of a gun's barrel before recoil. A continuous vigilance decades ahead of its time. preempting this internet era, confirming how similar we are, mostly when online. Moving beyond fear of death was and is built into that necessary trouble. Uhuru learnt from the seat of civilization, inspired efforts to redouble. One of a band of legends fighting for the black life and the black vote to be fully counted. Fannie Lou Hamer, Ralph Johnson Bunch, Prathia Hall, amongst many, all deserve operas to be mounted. The importance of connecting with the struggles in gender, class, and with multi-religious alliance is to this day still seen as a form of trouble-making defiance. Centuries of international self-similar conflict distilled into ideas whose time had come. But contemporary voter suppression, data mining, and police brutality show the battle is not yet won. The darkest night before a historic dawn. Medgar Evers, Andrew Schwerner, James Chaney, Malcolm X, way too early from history torn. Even a billy-clubbed, fractured skull didn't dim the slow crawl to illuminate truth, making a way out of no way, forged by nail and tooth, supported by a festival for the ages we need to repeat. Where is today's Belafonte, Simone, Davis Jr., Bernstein, Bennett, Byers, and more, who made sure that the power of song was a vital component at the struggle's core? Non-violence broke some of this repeated need to hate. But frightening technology is not new. However, do we have a heightened way to live together of late? More and more of us can communicate globally, yet What bridge are we building towards a positive fate? He embodied the patience, the resilience, the commitment, and the belief that eventually brought a black US president inaugurate. Generations of division mean the peace is only won through constant vigilance. We have to act, for an age of oneness won't just happen through positive inference.
Robert, it's a pleasure to be talking to you.
Great pleasure to see you again, Kevin. Likewise.
So this radar commission arrived and you responded to the challenge. Tell me what was going through your mind and why you came up with Good Trouble, Necessary Trouble for John Lewis.
I thought it was a great chance to express very up-to-date feelings about everything that was going on. I, in fact, attended Black Lives Matter march in June. I think it was quite soon after the terrible headlines for George Floyd. And I reckon it was earlier this year, I think I'd seen this amazing footage of John Lewis at a fair age on a chalk show from a few years ago. And at the end of this interview, he crowd surfed. And the distance between, the seriousness of all that he'd achieved, up until 1968, 69, let alone as one of the most sort of internationally famous congressmen in America. It's not actually always the case that happens, but his work over many decades had spread far and wide, and this was interlinked with this image of this eminent politician and campaigner having such great fun as well. I just thought that's an inkling into a personality of this amazing human. It would be great to spend some time delving in properly, because like many of us, black, white, pink or yellow, we've not done enough on so many great figures in black history.
So we're talking about a legendary figure in the civil rights movement, who, as you say, enjoyed this incredibly long, illustrious career as well. Martin Luther King was cut down in the prime of his life. The opening line of the poem, Good Trouble, that you've written, is a pairing made famous by a man who also had a dream. So I interpret that as a reference to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the kind of the kinship and the solid bond between the two of them. Can you expand a bit on that?
He had, I think, heard him first speak when he was... John Lewis had heard Martin Luther King, I think, speak on a radio broadcast, and I think he might have been about 15. But their friendship, even given, the relative shortness of Martin Luther King's life, was many, intense years from being young. For obvious reasons, Martin is placed on such a intensely high pedestal. What becomes more and more overt with studying someone like John Lewis is that you've got a number of amazing figures, not all very well known. I place that sort of honour that is rightful for Martin Luther King upon each and every one of them. It's so amazing how the landscape of what you think this was is very different as soon as you start to piece together the amount of names, the amount of risk of life, etc., that was placed squarely in front of everybody who was taking part in this activity. So the bravery, the commitment, the staunch belief in something that they may not live to see yes, immensely inspiring. I actually have some of the books I was reading here that were such an inspiration for writing the music and the poetry.
Robert, we know you first and foremost as a pianist and composer and band leader, but I understand that you've actually been writing poetry for many years. Has that always been something that you've wanted to bring to the fore? Because you've written lyrics before for the compositions that you've recorded, but writing poetry and addressing a subject of this magnitude, has that been on your mind for a while, or is it a recent development, do you think?
I would say a few years, I think, but it's seeing, sitting in a generation now, seeing several younger generations experiencing what we thought had at least been more buried, if not completely buried. So seeing these cycles of hatred and racism and such sort of violent expressions, it's both addressed for myself, but as much to put forward and share and learn, but particularly to share this incredible work and the fact that it's an inspiration. It's a shame we have to continue and need to work so hard in these areas, but it is ongoing, and someone like John Lewis's life is a testament to how little things have managed to move, even with a good span of life and work that he did. So it's been a mix of things. It's grown out of the writing lyrics, the move from hearing a number of great singers interpret my words to actually just being okay with sitting and narrating full on it's been very, very incremental, very, very, very slow. But I look forward to more. This was not an overt plan, years and years ago. It's come about bit by bit. Different ideas and dreams make themselves known. So I'm looking forward to do more.
So Robert, in the poem that you narrate, you name many important people, from Fannie Lou Hamer to Medgar Evers, James Chaney, Malcolm X. You give the sense of the movement, in inverted commas, being one that involved many people, and as you said before, it's a question of making sure that there is due recognition given to all of the people who contribute, regardless of the leaders. So there's that sense of the collective effort that comes through in the poetry. But also towards the end of the text as well, you ask questions. There's a tone which is challenging and if not demanding. So I'm thinking of the line in particular: where is today's Belafonte, Simone, Davis Jr., Bernstein, Bennett, Baez, and more? Who made sure the power of song was a vital component of the struggle's core? Tell me why it was necessary for you to adopt that tone as well, to actually ask questions as well as making statements.
Yeah. Well, as a musician, and then reading about one festival, that was with all these huge figures at the time, and kind of feeling that either there isn't enough of a comparable effort these days, or could be equally about us not seeing these type of efforts as they are overshadowed with more powerful publicity in other corners of the art, and that's whether it's jazz, hip hop, R&B, country, folk, so on and so forth. It's one thing to write a great song, put it up online, but without the push, without the money to put it on a billboard, it's a different type of experience. But the closest comparison, I think, would be someone like Colin Kaepernick, taking the ultimate risk with his career to make a point. And it's like, when I refer to that, and when I think about that rather, and referring to these names in the poem, It's very much each of those figures put a big risk upon what they were doing by coming and making a firm stand. The tone is, I think, more personally in a sense of with jazz, and I know that in recent times again there's another generations are bringing this to the fore in their work. But I think, given the history just within jazz of protest and civil rights and the connection and making, life better and fairer for more people who haven't had it in the past, it still feels like it is. There should and could be more. If not, if not now, with everything that's been hyper focused due to the extra pressures of this terrible pandemic, then when? And I wonder if in the coming months and the next year or two, we're not going to see more work reflecting these harder questions. This music has survived and helped people survive, dare I say it, even worse scenarios. It has been the glue and the ignition in people's, the positivity in their spirits to put things securely, and strongly in their thoughts that we can work forwards towards something better. As I said, one of the toughest things in reading about John Lewis is his peace with the idea that it's only a small amount of progression that may be made after all of this effort, after all of this risk to life, that he was at peace with not seeing it through. He was at peace with, the risk of death. It's early on in some of these books that you are completely, it's like a complete gradient upward. It's brutal. There's no gradual dealing with a thing so basic and so in your face. It's literally 1 or 0. It's like the risks are total. Lots of work addressing this is being inspired now. Or at least I hope so. So and I say that just having listened to half of Busta Rhymes' new album on the way down, and it's just the power and the energy. He's going straight in the earliest seconds of this album. There's no doubt. You couldn't put it in another year as to when something like that was released. So there we go. Someone with that kind of seniority is firmly putting, nailing his position to the mast. So I hope and I think there's more to come out of our jazz scenes to address this kind of stuff.
So you're talking about Busta Rhymes,
yeah,
a legendary figure from hip hop.
Yes.
Who has written some incredible lyrics over the years, and he's written some more frivolous lyrics as well. I mean, his range is quite wide. Coming back to you,
yeah.
you have done many different projects in lots of contexts, from working as a solo pianist to a great duo with the violinist Omar Puente.
Yeah.
Leading 6 or 7 piece groups, Panacea, and then having your trio, which has been a steady vehicle for you over the years. And you're leading the trio for this Radar Commission. Salim Rahman is on drums, Tom Mason is on bass. Can you tell me about how you've actually devised the arrangement for this piece, insofar as the trio is working with the recorded text, and the recorded text comes in at very, very specific points. It's kind of spread throughout the whole composition. So let's talk about the actual arrangement and that balance between the recorded text and the music.
I delved a little into some of my experiences writing a choir piece a few years ago, which called Invocation. The idea to think, I guess, around the pacing of the words being central. So I wrote the poem first. And so the way things push and pull, the tension, the lists of names, the questioning you were just asking me about, the more sort of accusatory tone, were things that I think when we come to play, there are definitive beginnings. And I say that because as pre-recorded, we can't really change with the timings once something has started. So it is about each time we've been able to rehearse and practice this, we're shaping ourselves around, all the intentions and the meanings in the poem. We might help to underline certain phrases, certain lines, certain words with particular musical elements. But I hear this as something larger than a trio in potential. It's been great fun today to be able to run through this a number of times and delve in, as we've yet to gig it in front of people. We don't know when, so like everybody. So it's really doing this in a vacuum with the strong or stronger sense of John Lewis's achievements as the fuel to take the leap.
Josephine, it's a pleasure to be talking to you. Can you tell me about the moment that you received the Radar commission and how you went about actually coming up with music for it?
Well, firstly, it was a really wonderful moment because of this whole time. You know, I go through periods of thinking, this is great, I can do lots of writing, lots of thinking, lots of walking, lots of swimming. And then I think, as all musicians do, have days when I miss the playing, I miss the live performances so much and sort of lose the motivation a little bit. So this came on a morning where I was thinking, I'm not really in the mood to push myself today. And then I got this email and it was so wonderful because it was an immediate sense of, oh, well, that's what I'll get on with. And yes, that was lovely to have a whole month of, well, being commissioned to write something, and something quite different as well, because in my proposal, I'd really come up with this idea that it would be for a different instrumentation than I'd done before. And it's a 12 to 15 minute piece, and I wanted it to be quite composition orientated rather than what I usually do, which is a sort of vague theme and then a lot of improvisation.
Lots of improvisation, yeah. So there's a specific theme, or there are certain things that have certainly inspired this piece as well. And one of them that you mentioned, which is really interesting, is the memoir by Helen MacDonald, H is for Hawk. Let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, this was interesting. So I was reading this book when I came down to Hastings for lockdown. So I moved down in March and haven't left. But it was amazing. It was an amazing time. I was staying in my mum's flat in the old town overlooking the sea and experiencing quite, I suppose, a very contemplative time, but watching the differences of the clouds and the waves and the sea and the wind, and putting all that together with this book that I was reading, this amazing memoir about the author's process of training a hawk whilst grieving the recent loss of her father, whom she was very close to. And at the same time, in it, she references a book that was written in 1940s, I think, by T.H. White, who grew up in St Leonard's. So that's all in there as well.
Which is just down the road.
It is down the road, and that's where I now live. So it was this really interesting process of trying to put all of the different emotions that came up for me reading that book, moving back to Hastings, which is where, well, I'm from this area. So having this sort of sense of home and sense of familiarity, but at the same time something missing, because this is a new era for us all. And yes, it was a sense of how can I create this piece out of all of that. And I think it's interesting because that definitely comes through. So the beginning of it stems directly from a quote in the book. And as soon as I read it, it's this description, the first time Helen MacDonald experiences this hawk, and it's incredibly powerful and dramatic. And the language is just quite alien, but also beautiful. And the first phrase of the piece just came to mind immediately as soon as I read that. So that was already in my mind. And then it develops into this sort of quite dissonant, chaotic thing. But at the end is a sense of closure and a sense of peacefulness, I think.
So you read the memoir. It's very powerful. These images are guiding you. Did you think specifically at that point about the choice of instruments and the timbres, or did that come a bit later?
There was definitely a sense that I wanted a bass clarinet in the mix. It's an instrument I've been writing for a little bit more, especially with my jazz orchestra, where the fifth saxophone chair is baritone and bass clarinet. And I lean more and more towards the bass clarinet because it's so resonant and contrasted even in itself, with not just the octaves and the range, but the sound of it, I think. And it's just so woody and hollow and deep and amazing. So I really wanted to write for bass clarinet. And then I think piano just made sense. I was considering having double bass, and then I wanted to be the third instrumentalist, so tenor and soprano saxophone that I'm playing. But I thought, I play a lot with double bass and I write a lot for double bass already, so I would quite like the challenge of writing for piano, not just a chord sequence, which obviously lots of us jazz musicians do, and then the pianist will interpret that with all of their wonderful voicings and knowledge. But I really wanted to dictate more than that and get into figuring out what works and what voicings I can come up with that would contrast and blend with the bass clarinet and the soprano and tenor saxophone.
So the bass clarinet is prominent with this lovely sort of weave of horns around it, and the ebb and flow in the piece is very, very it's very prominent. We hear that straight away, and I think we do get a sense of nature or the local environment, the sea, the ebb and flow of the sea, or maybe the sky or clouds rolling. Tell me a bit more about how these different images are coming through the music.
Well, that's nice to hear, because sometimes it feels quite abstract. You know, when you write a piece of music that's about an experience or about a place, and not using words or lyrics, but trying to get that across. And I think there are quite specific things that inspired me, and it was definitely being in this relationship, I think, with the sea, but with nature as well. And when it was lockdown in March and April, the weather was amazing, and I went up on East Hill, which is a sort of national park, and it's really like being in the wilderness once you get over the hill, so you can't see the town anymore. And it was so quiet, and there was nothing on the horizon and nothing in the sea, and no people around, just lots of insects and lots of clouds and lots of things that I suppose hadn't really taken the time to be with for a while. And then I started swimming in the sea quite early as well. So it's just an experience of being in the waves and experiencing that ebb and flow and having that as a sensation. It's very physical, and I think that comes out in the music as well, I hope.
So there's a contrast between this commission and the really interesting band, the trio Satori, that you lead, where it's just bass and drums and saxophone. So that's very open. There's a lot of space, and this is much more layered. Did you want something that would take you away from what we know you for, what we associate you with?
Yes, I think so. It was definitely a feeling of, well, I'm being commissioned as a composer rather than a saxophonist, and that being something that has really come to the fore, especially because I haven't been able to gig. And I think I wanted to do something really different from Satori, something much less improvisational, but with a little bit of room for improvisation, and certainly with the kind of flavour of jazz. Well, this is Jazz Radar, so I wanted that to stay, but yes, something different, something more contrasted, something really rich in tonality, which I think when you have a drums, bass, saxophone trio like Satori, that's much more limited, what you can do harmonically, what you can state harmonically. So yes, I did want to do something different and be perhaps known as for something different.
Who would you say your main influences as far as composition might be?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, when I first moved down here, when all gigs cancelled, okay, what can I do? Well, the first thing I did was to write a string quartet, which is hopefully going to be performed next year. But in order to do that, so it's I guess, what is it? It's classical music? Is it jazz music? I don't know what it is. There's no improvised content, so it's all purely written. And in order to get into string writing, I listened to quite a lot of Shostakovich and Stravinsky and Schubert, and they have definitely influenced this piece of writing as well. I think in terms of perhaps the way I write now is more linear rather than vertical. So jazz musicians a lot of the time are taught and then get into a habit of thinking quite vertically and quite structurally. So this is a big generalization, but there might be something about writing a chord sequence that happens repeatedly. But with the music that I've been writing recently, there hasn't really been a sense of that structure happening. It's like a through composition that I'm trying to find where it's going, and it's much more...
it's like one episode after another.
Yeah, it's quite organic like that. And perhaps it's been a little bit less melody based as well.
Yeah.
So I love writing a tune that often has a chord sequence with it, but with this and with the string quartet and the way that I've been listening to a lot of classic great composers over the centuries, I think that's been the influence to really, I don't know, let go of the previous way that I was developing as a composer and do something quite radically different for me.
Do you think that this could possibly develop into a band that you would write for on a regular basis?
I hope so. Tamar's moved to St Leonard's as well.
It's all happening in St Leonard's.
It's all happening in St Leonard's. And Alciona is somebody that I've played with a lot in various projects. And we had a rehearsal and it was amazing immediately. And I was thinking this might be quite a difficult piece to get together, and it wasn't. It just flowed and it was really nice. So I'd love to do more with Tamar and Alciona if possible.
Tamar Osborne, the bass clarinetist, baritone saxophonist, and Alciona Mick, the pianist, who you've had sort of long-standing musical relationships with.
Yes.
Which is important too, as well, isn't it? Having that bond with people.
Very much so. And I think it's one of the most difficult things about this time is, as musicians, we're incredibly social, and a lot of our social way of being comes from being in bands and seeing people, and when that's taken away, it's quite striking how much that means to us. Yes, Tamar and I go back donkey's years. We were at Junior Guildhall together, so we've done lots of different projects. I'm in her band, Colicuta, and we've been talking about doing some free improvisation to her films that she's making of the sea. So a kind of another relationship with nature that's developing, which I'm really excited about.
Josephine, it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Jazz South supports the development of jazz across the south of England outside London. It is led and hosted by Turner Sim Southampton, a concert hall and live music producing organisation with support from the University of Southampton and funding from Arts Council England. We hope that you can join us for more recordings by these outstanding jazz composers. Visit jazzsouth.org.uk/radar sessions for details on the series. Please join us next time.